You've heard from us all morning, and Kevin Donegan, Chris Jones, Andy Floor. We're going to sort of moderate this stakeholder meeting, but honestly, we want to hear from you. Andy's going to run around the microphone, so please raise your hand if you have a comment. Let me kick you off with a few housekeeping slides in case you weren't here this morning. CWWR has a new rulemaking webpage where you can land on this page and see all active rulemaking proceedings that are underway, various stages. But if you land on this page, you'll see green are active rulemakings organized by department. So the only active rulemaking for well construction and inspection are the BOE administration rules, also known as the licensing rules. Geothermal rules are listed as green, but we're just sort of gathering stakeholder contact information at this point. And a reminder, keep an eye on the latest news and upcoming events page on DWR's website. This QR code and this link will bring you directly to the BOE administration rulemaking page. This is actually obsolete. The well construction's gone. You can see my mouse. But hit this down arrow to expand this rulemaking BOE administration accordion menu, we call this. This is outlining why we need to amend these rules, how to sign up for a rulemaking listserv, and how to submit comments through a Google form on potential amendments to these rules. We got a couple of documents up there, but no red lines as of yet. All right, just said this is how you subscribe. This is what the notification list page looks like. Click over here to either log in and manage your notification lists or register to receive those. And you're looking for the BOE info/news listserv and the shallow geothermal rulemaking listservs. But feel free to contact us if you can't figure those out. Here is a direct link to that Google form comment document I mentioned. You have the opportunity through this form to submit comments on ground heat exchanger licensing requirements and then all licensing requirements, or you can skip the ground heat exchanger and go straight to only all licensing. But the organization of this comment form is similar to the organization of this presentation of major topics we're considering where we need feedback. And these bullets represent some of those major topics. I'll go through all of them now so that you're not bringing them up a little bit early, and then we'll click through a slide or two for each major topic. If there are questions, if there are comments at each time, we'll try to do them at that moment, step through, see where we wind up. So the first bullet is incorporating ground heat exchanger contractors. This is similar to what you saw this morning. Closed loop geothermal systems, ground heat exchanger contractors are essentially now going to be regulated similarly to water well drillers and pump installers. The board has been renamed to incorporate that, and we've added a sixth board member sitting up front here, Terry Proffer, certified geothermal designer. He needed a minimum of 10 years ground heat exchanger experience, but he has many more. So we're very excited to have Terry on board and help craft the language and rules to get ground heat exchanger contractors licensed. So here's an example of where we added ground heat exchangers to the board's statutes. So this is the licensing statute 3791-105. So before contracting for the construction of a well, the installation of a ground heat exchanger, or the installation of pumping equipment, an individual shall obtain a license for one or more methods of well construction, GX installation or pump installation, and register their rigs, including ground heat exchanger rigs. So basically just folding these contractors in with all of you into state law. License applicants, ground heat exchanger, well contractor, pump installer, all must demonstrate 2 years experience applicable to the license type. They need to pass written and oral exams related to the basics and specific methods of GX installation in this case, and knowledge of state laws and rules adopted in connection with those laws. And then this is an important one for the ground heat exchanger contractors in the room. 8A, this is still part of the licensing statute, but until the governor appoints the board member, so we've already done that, but until the board adopts rules concerning the licensing of ground heat exchanger contractors, an individual operating pursuant to a permit issued by the state engineer may continue to install ground heat exchangers in accordance with rules adopted by the state engineer. So until these licensing rules are in place and in effect, and these individuals are licensed, they can continue operating under their permit. And then after the rules are in place and we have the licensing process going, ground heat exchanger contractors will need to apply for their ground heat exchanger contractor license. They're required to pass an oral exam, but as long as they're under a current permit, they will not be required to demonstrate their 2 years experience or pass the written examination, since they've taken a written examination for their current certification. So if you're currently under a ground heat exchanger certified installer permit, keep those active for as long as you can. Just keep renewing them, and then eventually you'll be applying for your license.
That's not the water well license, that's just for the geothermal.
That's only for people applying for a ground heat exchanger license. A couple more comments on incorporating ground heat exchanger contractors. We need to talk exams and experience. We know there's an NGWA vertical closed loop exam in order to get their certification. We know IGSPA has certifications and additional educational offerings. And eventually we're going to need to revise Colorado's test to reflect Colorado ground heat exchanger installation standards. Yep.
Is it going to kind of be like just an addition, like cable tool drilling, mud drilling, geothermal drilling, like an addendum?
Not necessarily. This is actually the next bullet.
Sorry.
We need to talk about license types. So we have a well construction license, and then you have the subcategories of drilling. We have a pump installation license, a couple of subcategories based on that. I believe the statute is set up such that it is a ground heat exchanger installer license, and then we might have subcategories under that. I don't have it in here, but we did put in a thing that if you're currently licensed for well drilling, you can automatically apply for ground heat exchanger license without demonstrating your additional experience. Much like if you're already licensed in mud rotary, you can apply for air rotary. So we did want to throw a bone to the drillers there. But what license types would we have for ground heat exchangers? Is there a vertical drilling and grouting license? Is that akin to the water well drillers? Is there a near surface horizontal piping, fusing, headers, and testing type license? Similar in concept to pump installation, though very different, obviously. And then there is the opportunity to introduce special licenses for any overarching license type. So I don't know that we're going to solve this here today, but does anyone have any immediate thoughts on license types, special licenses? I know we're the majority drillers here.
Yeah? Oh, go ahead.
Yes, you mentioned that anyone that holds a current water well license in the state of Colorado would not need to take any kind of test. They can immediately apply for a ground source heat exchange installer license. Is that correct?
They don't need to demonstrate 2 years experience installing ground heat exchangers to apply for a ground heat exchanger license. You'd still need to pass any applicable written and oral exams.
Okay, so there will be an applicable exam.
Correct.
Okay, all right. That clarifies my question. Thank you.
Yep.
So there's like vertical drilling and then there's like gallery wells. So you'll have like a vertical and a dug?
Right.
Okay.
Yes, I think Terry and I were just talking that maybe the horizontal excavated style is similar to a driller, where a driller can install gallery wells. maybe a vertical ground heat exchanger can install horizontals, but if you only want to install horizontals, maybe you're more similar to this horizontal piping fusing header style license. But all concepts we need to explore.
So where does the licensing stop? Does it stop at the house before the heat exchanger, or does it include the heat exchanger, or what?
This also is something we're talking about. I believe the definition stops at, I can't remember the exact language, but I think it talks about the manifold connecting to the heat exchanger, but not necessarily including the heat exchanger. But don't hold me on permanent record on that, I'm not positive. But again, it's a similar, where do you cut it off, similar to the plumbing board?
Typically, whether it's residential or commercial, we like to see the contractor, now this is not, I'm not talking as a board member, but just as a designer of these systems, we like to see the installation contractor for the ground loop take the headering all the way to the mechanical room. The reason for that is we want one point of responsibility, because all of this plastic pipe is fusion welded and all that, and we don't want multiple entities involved where there could be finger pointing, that sort of thing. And how that translates to DWR standards and regulations, I think, is to be determined maybe.
Yeah. Yep, I think needs to be determined and addressed.
I promise I won't ask any more questions after this.
Please fill out the form.
Okay, so Chris and his team and you guys are already maxed out. So what's the proposal for adding guys to help lighten the load?
Yeah, one small advantage we got out of the legislation that gave the board this responsibility was for the well inspection program to collect all permitting fees from ground heat exchanger permits. Currently, it's an annual permit to installers, but through rulemaking, we'll address what that looks like for permitting new ground heat exchanger installations. I know it's not our idea to permit every individual borehole, but maybe we permit a project. Maybe we depend that on the size of the boreholes. But there is an opportunity to collect those fees because we're not evaluating whether or not these are impacting water rights. We only need to observe the construction of them. So we were able to get 100% of ground heat exchange permits.
So be able to hire more people?
I hope so.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it depends on how much work that end takes, because it might end up being a net negative.
Yeah, we gotta look at it. And it's also geographic dependent. It's not always the same place as water wells, so a lot to think about. In the interest of time, I want to move forward a little bit, but please fill out the comment form because we want to have these discussions, and we don't have all the answers. One last slide on specific ground heat exchanger contractors. They are currently only required to provide financial responsibility in a surety bond or alternative funds for $10,000. That's dating back to 2004, last time their rules were addressed. Should we increase them to match water wells? Does it need to be higher? Could it be a sliding scale? All concepts we're thinking about for all license types as well. And then finally, continuing education. How do we incorporate them into the CE committee? Do we add the ground heat exchanger board member to that committee? Do we consider accepting IGSPA credits or other agency credits in terms of CE? Do we separate CE specific for CE licenses? Ground heat exchanger CE for ground heat exchanger licenses, well construction CE for well construction licenses, all topics that could be further explored in the rules. Okay, now getting into all license types. These would essentially, like I said, all license types. We're just chatting along the wall here. What does 2 years experience mean? You can't apply for a license until you have 2 years experience. Well, the definition says 24 months of on-site, hands-on activities that directly result in the construction of a well, installation of a ground heat exchanger, or installation of pumping equipment. I bet if we had each of you write it down on a piece of paper, we would each have 200 different definitions of what 24 months on-site hands-on activities that directly result in the construction means. So what can we do to improve this definition? Can we put more, a minimum days per week, minimum hours per week, minimum days per month? I don't know. I don't have any recommendation at this time. We are looking for feedback. If you don't want to bring it up now, fill out the form. Education accredited program substitution. We have that allowed basically at board discretion. Do we need to be more descriptive in the rules or keep it at board discretion? Can we self-attest or self-verify experience if we have worked for someone that has passed away or have been working for ourselves on our own ranch? Can we bring back apprenticeship? What about a legal experience? Are there other substitutions that can be contemplated? We've talked about ICSPA has accredited installer certifications. They're changing their certifications to be more of a driller certification, a fuser certification. So all things that we want to talk about, think about what works in other states, what doesn't work in your opinion. Please let us know. And if you have any comments now, we can run Andy by.
Does the 2 years experience go for the well inspectors?
Well, inspectors are not licensed. All right, more all licenses, exams. Do we need to review the applicability of national exams? Are they still one-to-one good enough from NGWA? Is there any way that we could lean on our NGWA partners and help utilize their state testing centers to administer our Colorado tests? Oral exams. Pandemic forced us to go virtual for a period of time. Are we still offering that option? Are we offering in-person only? Do they have a sheeter in front of them just telling them what to say? Maybe we offer in-person for your first license, virtual for additional, something like that. I don't know. Probably get into comments on license exams.
I've got a question on the oral exams that they do now for contractors in this association. Do you guys set a time frame, like your oral exam is 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, or I've heard of some going hour and a half. I've heard of some going 15 minutes. Doesn't seem to be much of a format there.
Each oral exam is scheduled for 30 minutes. I have not seen one go much longer than 35 minutes. I've seen some go 15 minutes. It just depends on what licensed contractor, how many licenses the contractor is going for, and the board's opinion of how things are going and how many questions they need to ask to get a feeling for if the applicant is suitable for licensing. I have not heard of anything going an hour and a half.
I have.
Maybe they did, but
Not to me. Well, really, it wasn't me. I promise.
Sometimes we do have technical difficulties that slows it down, but I don't remember any like that either. But are you not sure you're not talking written exam? Where it's taken of that? Okay. That's before my time.
You youngster.
Any other comments on exams? Not the most exciting part.
Well, it seems like going to these national exams, online and stuff, with places you say this, seems to be working pretty well.
Yeah, I think I agree. I'm not as tuned into that process, but I like the fact that they have those the lockdown mechanisms they have through the NGWA.
Yeah, and on the rules tests for Colorado, they seem to set those up pretty quick and fast.
Okay, yeah.
On the written exams.
Yeah, we got brand new Colorado rules and regs test as well for anyone applying for a license that reflect some of the new rule changes. So
You do have one now in play?
it is, if it's not available online, it will be very shortly.
Yeah, we don't make the test available
No,
online,
that's true,
but I
yeah.
did rewrite the test for 2026. So they are incorporating the adopted rules.
Okay, so the rules and regs test for Colorado is not online?
No, it's in person, it's written, closed book, it's proctored by an individual from the Division of Water Resources.
Oh, I thought they did that online.
Only the NGWA tests are online.
Right.
Well, they're not even online, you have to go to a specific testing
Yeah,
center.
yes, I thought they did that with
Do they put Colorado on there knowing that it's going to get sent to us? Because I saw some states on their testing center. Maybe
Say
not,
that again?
but on the NGWA site, maybe they say Colorado because it's full.
Someplace I saw that
Yeah.
you still
Wait.
do, go into those testing centers for that.
Yeah.
So, then I got one more question. For the state, Colorado state test, rules test, is that what am I trying to say? So, you only doing that certain times of the year on that test, or you just set it up?
Anytime, set it up with Laura usually is proctoring that, or if you're near a division office, she might be able to set it up with them too.
But my understanding is that oral exams are quarterly or something like that.
They're currently scheduled for 4 oral exams before the regularly scheduled board meeting, which is actually every other month right now.
Oh, every other
The even months, yeah.
month?
Back for a moment to the proving the work experience. It would be pretty open and shut if you came up with a certain amount of hours of work experience that you needed. Then on the pump installation reports, the well installation reports, you simply put the helper's name down and then an estimated amount of hours that he worked on that project, and then you're off to the races. And at some point, then he's, over a couple-year period, he'll have that many hours, and now you're done. We've put our names of the people that have worked on our wells for years, for more than a decade down, just because we want them to be able to go back online and be able to prove that they've been able to work during those stretches of time.
Right, and you gave me a great opportunity to admit that we jinxed ourselves this morning, and the well construction report will now be online on the 21st. So I already had to delay it from the 13th. But to Joel's point, we are asking that question now. We are saying, list the driller on site if it was not the responsible license holder who's signing this at the end. Don't know if we can list more than one. It might just be one for now. You can always list additional people under additional information too.
And the hours don't really matter. It's the jobs. I don't think the hours matter.
Well, sorry, it's the individual. We've all had guys working for us for 20-plus years that would no more than a man on the moon make a contractor. We've had other guys that we've employed that we haven't employed for a month, and we could turn them loose and let them do goddamn near anything. So it's up to the individual in there, and how are you gonna figure that out? Because that's the important part. What type of individual are you dealing with? Are you dealing with a competent, quality individual who can do something? Or are you just dealing with a dud, had a government job most of his life, and doesn't know what the fuck to do? Sorry. Not sorry.
Some of that falls on you.
And the license holder is a tester.
And you're endorsing him, that's on you.
How's that?
I said, if you have an incompetent person and you're endorsing him, that's on you.
I'm not saying I'm endorsing them. I've said I've had helpers and stuff that have worked for me for over 20 years that I would not endorse as being a competent contractor that would no more make it, they've had the experience in there, and their experience is, if they've worked for me and they've done their job, in what they were doing, that's great. They can't be good at everything. You have to hire different people to do different jobs, but they might have worked for me as a helper on a drill rig for a lot of years, and they're not capable of drilling and should never actually be drilling.
Not a contractor.
I was just going to comment that yes, there's there's a form where you're attesting your experience, somebody's verifying it. It eventually makes its way to the board, and the board is the ultimate decider. And through an oral exam, hopefully they can figure out whether or not they know what they're
I'll
doing.
make another point. There's one thing that determines what makes a good driller, what makes a person a driller. That's their ability to see what they can't see. They have to deal with what's going on down hole. They have to have the imagination and the vision to understand what is happening down that hole and figure it out while it's happening. You can't go in there blind. You can't go in there with black and white vision in there. You have to be an exceptional person that has that ability to see that. I've seen that with some employees and never.
I think a lot of that will play out in the oral exam.
Hopefully, yeah. That's the last steps, and that's really where the board, who have experts, is weighing in. I got a comment?
Yeah, currently, for geothermal, each driller has to have their own license. Are you going to allow, if we go to 24 months, are you going to allow them to work under someone else's license like a water well?
Right, the structure for ground heat exchanger licensing will be the same as water well and pump installation, where currently one company needs one license, and anyone who's directly employed by them is authorized to install wells, as long as that person is directly controlling their work. Special license types, monitoring holes and wells penetrating through confining layers. Is that something the board wants to think about? Do we need to add any additional drilling methods, sonic, any additional pump installation types, methods, GPMs, submersible versus turbine? I don't know, just all thoughts. But need to get to a few more big topics. Financial responsibility, these come in the form of compliance, surety bonds, or alternative funds. We raised it from $10,000 to $20,000 in 2018. Does anything cost the same as it did in 2018? Is 20,000 still the correct number? Is it 40,000? Is it 30? Is it somewhere in between? Is there any way to right size it based on the license type or number of rigs you carry? I don't know. Are the rules sufficient with respect to alternative funds? That's kind of black and white in statute, but rules are an opportunity to do better than statute where we can. And a big one is the 2-year period of liability that your bond needs to carry for. Is the wording correct on that? I think it's tied in right now to the last time you file a well construction report or pump installation report, but we all know that timing can get off from when your license was active. Travis?
I guess it depends how you define the liability. I guess it would depend how you define the liability for that 2 years, you know.
Right.
Service versus new, different things like that, it sure comes into play.
Yeah. Same idea, yeah. So any thoughts, comments, submit them to us, and we'll see if we can work them into the wording, because I frankly, it is a little confusing the way it's written now.
When's the last time you pulled somebody's bond?
The board doesn't necessarily pull somebody's bond, but through the, I guess, proof or the allegation process, should the board find an individual responsible, and then the owner could go after their bond after that. So in the last 3 years, I know of 2 bonds that have been depleted completely.
What, 20,000 enough?
No, 20,000 was not enough to, take care of the damages that occurred.
Was 40,000.
40,000, make it any better.
Yeah, the bond was never intended to cover completely every single well or accident, but it's a evidence of financial responsibility. That doesn't need to be the full cost to replace a well. That's going to depend on the person, but I don't think it does. But I do think we need to adjust the bond per at least inflation.
Well, I always looked at it like the bond, with the state for this was to pay the state to help, the cost to oversee this. But, as far as liability or replacement of a well or anything like that, I would think that would just come into the court system. It would have nothing to do with the state. It's just the money I always thought went to the state. Could take that money to, follow this transaction, with the customer, and then at that point, the customer goes and sues or whatever.
Yeah, so part of what the bond could be for is to reimburse the state for any money that was expended in the investigation or the pursuit of the investigation. So, if the contractor wasn't willing to pay some sort of penalty enforced by the board or district court, the state or anyone else that was impacted or damaged by that contractor could go after that bond. So you're right, it's not just for the owner, it could be for the state, though in my recollection, I don't know if the state has ever actually gone after a contractor's bond in recent memory.
Not so much that they go after the bond, but in courts they do go after contractors. So,
Yes, absolutely.
So how was the money depleted? So you said there were 2 cases where the money for the bond was depleted. Did that go after a civil trial where the contractor lost and then that money was removed from the bond?
The ones I'm thinking of are ones where I brought complaints to the board found the individual had violated a rule, and then the owner, submitted a claim to the bond company, to the board. The bond company did their investigation to find if the board had found a rule violation. They found it, and then they released the bond to the individual who was claiming damages.
But in those cases, didn't they follow up?
Just stay next to George.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Well, in these situations, would the owner follow up with a lawsuit? That'd be logical to me, to the contractor, period, whether he's bonded, not bonded, whatever.
They certainly could, and there's nothing stopping a homeowner from pursuing a contractor civilly, but that costs money. The board has in their statutes and rules a method to, claim the bond, and that doesn't cost the owner a lot of money. So that's why homeowners go after those bonds in some cases, just because it doesn't require a lawsuit. It requires the completion of an investigation of allegations that a rule was violated.
Well, I don't know, I work on wells that cost well over $1 million to drill, and I bond my own work for those jobs. But, in this kind of instance, this is like a basic fiduciary cost. It has nothing to do with really what the end cost would be, and that's what the court systems are for. It's the way I would proceed. I always thought that was just for the state's, lawyer work, whatever, their investigation. That's what the costs were to incur, but I didn't really know it. It went to the homeowner. I figured the homeowner would have to take that responsibility on also.
Yeah. So, my thought is the bond was increased to $20,000 in 2018. You look up, what could you buy for $20,000 in 2018 versus today's dollars? The equivalent's $25,000. Do we simply just follow inflation to try to maintain the status quo? Or is there a need, given that, maybe homeowners don't want to pursue a lawsuit? It's not in your interest to increase the bond, but is it in the interest of the well owner, the public that could be damaged, to have a higher bond? We're asking the questions, we're not forcing anything.
Well, part of the bond situation is just that someone, either they have the money to be able to do the cash bond, or someone is willing, they have good enough credit that someone is willing to bet on them to be able to get a bond. Okay, that part of that is like a financial credit rating, if you will, to get someone into the mix. So when I look at this, it's like 20 grand for somebody running around in one pump truck that's pretty reasonable, okay? Somebody running 3 drill rigs and 2 pump trucks, that's a different story. And so, but trying to figure out what to do on a sliding scale is a nightmare.
We agree.
Well,
You just opened the
yeah.
book.
Why do you, I mean, do we even need the bond? I mean, shouldn't you have your own insurance, or should there be a minimum level of insurance to cover this that's not even part of the state? I mean, why do we even need that bond? I mean, every project we do for geothermal, we have to bond way higher than this. And you know, if we bond it, but we also have to have, you know, general liability insurance and all the other insurance and automotive and umbrella, and that's, you know, way higher.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, insurance is another way to go. The board, through statute, is required to request a bond to show that evidence of financial responsibility. So that part's in statute at least. But would the administrative rules allow the board to say, hey, beyond the bond, you also have to show $250,000 in general liability, $1 million in general liability?
Why not?
The board would potentially
State
have
of
that.
Colorado does it for your automobiles. Why not the state of Colorado do it for contract liability?
We're already paying that
$1 million in general liability.
Scrap the bond and just you have to improve your insurance, your overall liability insurance. And it seems to me like that would be a lot more fair.
I think, you know, being licensed in Utah and Wyoming as well as Colorado, I see it both ways, both sides of the table here. To protect the average homeowner, I think that's what this bond is for. And I think it's the easiest, cleanest, and cheapest method of protection for the average well and average homeowner. If you start throwing insurance liability, you know, $300,000, $500,000, $1 million, whatever, that homeowner's gonna have hell getting that out of the insurance company. This is the small stuff that your average well, the homeowner can easily get to if there's a big problem. So I wouldn't change this at all. I'd keep it at 20. I hesitate to go to 40 because a lot of jobs aren't 40 that I personally see and do. But I think 20 is something they can go after if you really screw up. And it's easy to go after, like to your point earlier, Chris, there.
Sorry about this, another question. You know, to me, it's kind of like everybody has to have car insurance. And if there's an accident, you know, insurance is going to get involved. Well, I see the same thing. You know, I mean, in my business, we have a couple $1 million worth of liability. You know, insurances cover things. And, you know, it's there to protect us and a customer, to tell you the truth. So I don't really see where, you know, that's why I've always, in my mind, I always thought that, you know, maybe I'm wrong, but the bonds part was just for the state really to ensue what the problems are and come up with a conclusion, your opinion, and then it would go to court. You know, I mean, I just can't see any business being a business that doesn't have, already paying for insurance that's gonna cover whatever needs to be done.
Well, I think we found another research project for your Buck Lively scholarship winners to go back in the history of why are these bonds in statute, because we can't change state law, it's in law. So it'd be interesting to know where it came from and how it evolved, but I think we would have the ability to add, in addition to a bond, some sort of insurance requirements, but for now, we should probably sneak over to a new topic. Licensing and registration fees. Don't even really want to bring this up because I don't even know what we really can do. They're pretty low, in my opinion, for the amount of work that we do to even process licenses and manage our databases. But the law did just change in a way that the board can raise fees only in an amount that is necessary to further the purposes of this statute. I question whether or not our license renewal fees are currently supporting the board's administrative costs. So we're looking into that, but we're not proposing any new higher fees at this time. But it's something we're looking into. I don't know what other states charge you to renew or to register a rig.
Why don't you just have AI do all that stuff?
Yeah. Run them through. Similar to fees, the statute removed the cap for board-assessed penalties. We do have a policy in place that includes a penalty schedule. The rules could contemplate an upper limit where the statute does not. We used to have an upper limit, but we do not currently, other than within BOE policy 2019-2. And then for our final 10 minutes or so, let's get into the really fun ones. Direct employment. It has this big, long definition in here, but the key words in here are that the employer, who is supposed to be the licensed one, is responsible for and directly controlling the performance of the employee, and where applicable is covered by workers' comp and unemployment comp. So that is the situation we were talking about, where Joel might be the license holder signing the well construction form, but his driller on site is directly employed by him, and he is allowed to install a well because he's directly employed by a license holder. What directly employed does not mean is an independent contractor or a subcontractor, and that's spelled out in the admin rules right now. Can it be better spelled out or better defined or described? We always throw out hypotheticals that maybe you have an employee who is licensed but is not the business owner or responsible for or directly controlling the performance of the employee who's out there doing the work. Does that satisfy the definition? The definition of employing others at the company such that those other employees can work on wells or pumps. I think there's been a variety of arrangements over time that may or may not be legal in these definitions in statutes. So we don't have any direct or specific red lines at this time, but a concept that needs to be addressed. Specifically, we know on geothermal projects, they may be subcontracted from a general contractor. The general contractor may have signed a contract saying, I'm going to put in a ground heat exchanger system. The statute says you must be licensed to contract for the installation of a ground heat exchanger. So these are really tough topics that need to be addressed. It applies to water wells, it applies to pumps. I know it happens out there on bigger projects. The home builder might be the GC saying, I'm going to give you a well. They're not technically licensed to contract for a well. So we need to work on this definition, these terms, and hopefully spell it out more clear.
Well, most of the work we do, a good percent of it. A good percent of the work we do, we'll be working for a general contractor that's building a plant or building a pipeline, from a well. And we might just do the downhole stuff and to ground surface, that's it. We might rent some pipeline, we might do other things, but, I don't know how you can get around that in these statements you're making there, but.
There's some very specific language in statute that is difficult, and maybe the right lawyers can swing it one way or the other, but it says before contracting for the installation of a well or installation of pump equipment, you must obtain a license for well construction and pump installation. So.
Well, we're licensed in the work we do. I mean,
right.
it actually refers to some rules in the books usually from the engineers that says, you have to use a licensed contractor per this statute,
right.
For the rules.
Yeah, and is that enough if the contract specifically identifies that they will use a licensed person? I don't know.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on this topic? I'm sure we could spend the next hour on it, but I don't want to.
Supervision is pretty important, I think.
Supervision, yeah. Yeah, supervision is also defined. I didn't put it up here, but Brad, did you have a comment?
I don't know if bona fide is a good enough definition of employment, but the employment needs to be bona fide employment. It can't be, I ran my head against the wall with Doug years ago on this, and that just because somebody gets put on payroll and is covered by workers' comp and they live 2 counties away and they never attend any of those job sites, they never have any daily functions in that business other than to provide a license number, that is not directly employed. It's not bona fide employment. And that the board will just have to make that determination, but I think they need to be,
Yeah,
it needs to be better, clarified.
yeah, you're not directly controlling someone you never talked to.
Exactly. Or that you just get a blank report from in an email and you sign the bottom of it and turn it into the state.
Exactly.
That's not bona fide employment.
Right. Yep.
Why can't the license holder at least make an appearance at the job site? Inspect his employees' work, make sure they're doing it the way he needs to do it. I'm fine, I got allowed.
Yeah, these are good ideas. Submit them through the form, through email. Went through these really quickly, and we all want to get to happy hours, so if there's anything else in the admin rules that need to be addressed, bring them up now, send an email, fill out the form, and we'll keep working. All right, thanks again for having us. Thanks again to CWWCA for hosting the geothermal guys. It's been really fun.